This is a 3D film camera.
Behold a miracle. Introducing the Nimslo 35mm three-dimensional camera.
It's called the Nimslo 3D, and it was released in the 1980s to the consumer market to be able to make some cool lenticular-like stereoscopic images into trading cards for your home photos. And it unfortunately turned kind of obsolete fairly quickly back then, but it's having a massive resurgence nowadays because you can do some cool things with the photos that you get from these cameras. You may have seen them on social media and in adverts and maybe some music videos and stuff like that. But what you can do is you can take the negatives from a Nimslo 3D and turn them into a little animated kind of wibble wobble effect type of video or GIF, which I think looks really cool. Anyway, I've got myself one of these Nimslo 3D cameras, and today I'm going to show you how to get the best out of it, how to use it, and also how to scan in and animate the images you get out of it on a computer. So the Nimslo 3D is one of just a few 3D film cameras you see fairly often. The Nishika N8000 is probably the other more common one made about the same time as this. And recently Rito have made a similar version just with 3 lenses, but they all work in a very similar way. So you can see that the Nimslo has 4 lenses in a horizontal line across the front of the camera. And each of those takes a photo at the exact same moment in time. The photo from each lens then takes up half a frame of film, meaning that every time you fire the shutter on this camera, you use 2 frames of film to get the 4 different photos from each lens. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, these cameras were originally designed as a bit of a cool gimmick, and you'd send off your film to a special processing plant and they'd send you back cards that acted as prints. And if you've ever had trading cards or those sorts of things where you kind of look at them and you turn them like this and the subject looks 3D, that's exactly what these cameras were designed to do for your own photos. So you kind of create your own little 3D cards out of your home images, which is very cool. Nowadays, though, unfortunately, that technology doesn't exist anymore, as far as I'm aware, but people have been very clever in figuring out different ways to get the most out of these 3D film cameras. So what you can do is you can take a photo with the camera, you can take each of the 4 frames and you can animate them so that they go back and forth, and because they're on a horizontal line when they take a photo, each lens is taking a photo from a slightly different perspective to the other, and so you can get these really cool like stereoscopic image sort of GIF animated video type things with all the images that you take with a Nimslo 3D or a Nishika or a similar 3D film camera. And they're becoming quite popular now. I see it a lot on social media, and I've had mine for about a year or so now and shoot it for various things. So I'm going to show you the situations that I shoot it in, the results that I get, and then how I process the film and scan it in to be able to get those animated videos at the end of it. So one of the things that works really well when you're shooting with a 3D film camera is having a sort of differentiation between subject matters. Typically, it's cool to have something closer to the camera and something further away from the camera. I use this a lot to shoot live music, which is great because, like, let's say someone's playing a guitar. If you kind of angle the camera to look down the headstock of the guitar, you can get that wibbly wobbly effect with the guitar in front of the person that's singing, which is quite cool. You can also use that with microphones and with other bits and pieces in the live music scene. But I've also seen other very cool images where people get their subjects to like throw a load of confetti in the air or even a load of fake cash, and as it's falling down, it creates this really cool effect. The bits can sort of create shadows on the person that you're photographing, and it just has this really cool way of giving a lot more depth to the image, because as each of the lenses takes a photo, you know, if you've got something that's falling down in front of your face slightly, you'll start to get differing angles of that, and it's sort of frozen in time, which I think works really cool. So my advice as to how to get the best out of 3D film cameras like this is to try and play with that a bit, is to try and think of having something in the foreground and something in the background of your image. If you were to just take a landscape, a big sort of landscape with a 3D film camera, you wouldn't get nearly as much of the effect because there's less to sort of reference it off. And if you're focusing on something far away from the camera, the movement will not nearly be as exaggerated. So, you know, if you're going to go out and do landscape photography with it, it's kind of cool to have maybe like a line of flowers or bushes or something in the foreground that you can kind of play off when you then animate the photos afterwards, just to give it that bit of movement. But I find that these are definitely best for kind of portrait-ish scenarios, particularly at like house parties, like I say, live music, festivals, all that sort of stuff would be really cool with these when you're kind of playing about. I actually did a shoot recently on New Year's Eve, and there was a big beer pong tournament that took place at my friend's house, and that turned out really cool because you can get like the angles of people like throwing the ping pong balls, looking to get them into the cups, people with their drinks in their hands, and that all played off really well, particularly the ones that are like the ping pong balls flying through the sky, so they're like mid-flight towards a cup. They came out really cool on the Nimslo 3D. So stuff like that, these cameras really shine. The only thing is that these cameras were made to be a bit of a gimmick, and I know that the Nishika N8000 is almost a toy camera really. It's very plasticky in its construction. It's got like fake stickers on it to make it look a bit more beefy. I think the Nimslo is a little bit more robust, and I like the way this is built, but they do break fairly easily. For example, I had to get this one repaired because I dropped it one time with the flash in, and the hot shoe came away from the top of the body, which meant that the flash didn't fire every time I took a photo, which was annoying. Speaking of flash, that's absolutely one of the best ways to get the most out of one of these cameras, particularly if you're shooting at night, obviously. These do come with their own Nimslo 3D flashes, which are okay. I mean, they do the job, but I've actually paired it with a Canon Speedlight flash, which I've got in this case here. Obviously, with it having a hot shoe, you can use any flash you like with it, and I've just got this kind of more compact. This is a Speedlight 133A, just powered by two AA batteries, and I find that this kind of works well for focusing the flash a little bit more on subjects. And because I use this so often at night, when I'm out and about and at parties and at gigs and stuff like that, a slightly smaller, lightweight flash I think works really well with the camera. But you can use any sort of flash you'd like on it. You can get a massive one if you really wanted to. And using the flash, I think, really helps in getting the most out of it in those situations as well. We can take a quick peek inside the camera now so I can show you what it looks from the inside, and it's kind of as you'd expect it to look, really. You can see that each of the four lenses has their own sort of frame here, and so you can see how each of the images gets projected onto the film in the back of the camera here. In terms of processing the film that you shoot with the Nimslo, it's very easy. Just go and send it off to a regular lab or do it from home yourself. As long as you're using, standard film, C41, E6 or black and white film, then almost any lab will be able to process it for you. In terms of scanning it in, it should be fairly straightforward as well, because essentially what you're getting are just half frame photos from the Nimslo itself. So you should be able to send off the film from a Nimslo to any good lab, or if you process it from home yourself, it's very easy to do that as well. And then it's up to you what you do with the scans once you get them back. Now, this is where the sort of tutorial part of this video comes in, because I'm going to show you how I then go about using my scans from the Nimslo 3D and how I go about animating those to become those stereoscopic image sort of GIFs that you see all the time on social media. So for this tutorial, I'm going to turn around and sit at the computer and show you how I go about doing this. Hopefully it'll be informative. I'm using Final Cut Pro 10 on my Mac for this, but I'm pretty sure any other video editing software will have very similar vibes. So you should hopefully be able to follow this tutorial fairly quickly. Okay, so I'm now over at the computer. I've got a project open on Final Cut Pro in front of me here, and I've got a load of Nimslo 3D scans that I'm going to process, and I'm going to show you how I get the results that I do in the quickest way, and I think the most accurate way, to be honest, as well. It's a nice, easy way to do it this way, and once you've done it once, you can use the same project to very easily just apply the same settings to any scans that you drag in. So I think this is the quickest and kind of easiest way to go about getting the results you'd like from a Nimslo. So the first thing to do is to obviously import all of your scans into Final Cut, which I've got in front of me here. These are all from a shoot that I did recently where I was filming a load of live music sessions. So you can see here are some of the photos that I took. These are all taken on Cine Still A100T, which is why you can see that cool halation going on in the lights behind you. So, and then you can also see me eating some pizza here, which is great. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and edit together this photo that I took of somebody playing guitar. I just think it's got quite a cool vibe with the guy rocking out on the guitar with the lights behind him. So I'm going to select each of the 4 photos like this. I'm not sure why that's only selected a tiny bit, but if I select the whole thing, then we've got all 4 of those photos selected. The way I did that was I clicked on the first one and then just held shift and clicked on the last one. And it highlights them all at the same time. So I'll then drag them down into my timeline here. You can see I've actually got one that I edited earlier just over here. But the first thing to do is to check that you've got those 4 frames in the right order, if that makes sense. Because sometimes if you scan them in yourself, or if you get scans back from the lab, they can be in the wrong order in terms of from left to right with the frames. So I'm just going to double check that these are right, because I know for a fact that I don't think these were. So you can see 27 and 28 there are the right way round, but I think 29 and 30 actually came before them. So I'm going to drag these back to the front of the timeline. And then the way you can check to make sure that they are in order is if you just move your mouse over all 4 of them and make sure that you can see a clear movement between left and right and there's no sort of jumping back and forth. And this looks like it's doing the job very nicely. So now they're in the right order. What I'll do is I'll drag each of the 3 frames that come after the first one on top of each other to be able to make a little stack. So I'll drag this one on top of here, then I'll drag the 3rd one on top of the 2nd, and then I'll drag the 4th one on top of the 3rd. So you've got this stack of images going on here, and this is important because what we now want to do is line up the subject of each frame so that you've got something central that the animation can sort of wobble around. And definitely what's best when you're doing this, especially when you're taking photos of people, is to concentrate on their face. I've had it sometimes in the past where I've been filming like live music stuff, and I've kind of thought that maybe focusing on the headstock of the guitar would look cool, but it never does for some reason. It's always better to just focus on the face of the person that you're photographing and then let the other bits in the frame move around it. So what I now want to do is line each of these frames up so that the guy's face is in line on every one of the frames. And I do that by, first of all, I'm going to disable these top 2 clips because we're going to do it one at a time. You press the V button on the keyboard to disable those, and then I'll go down and I will highlight the 2nd frame. What I then do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to zoom in a fair bit so that I can see what I'm doing. We go to about 150%. I can use this little bar here to move it up. You can see there's actually a hair that's got onto the scans with this one, which I don't particularly mind sometimes. And then what you want to do is the frame that you've got highlighted, which should always be the one above the frame before it. I'll then take the opacity down so that I can start to see both frames at the same time. And then once I've done that, I'll click the little transform tool button here. And now all I want to do is drag the 2nd frame so that it matches the person's face to the 1st frame. And I normally always use the nose as a reference here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this, and when they start to form one nose, you know that you're in the right spot. What I then tend to do is just play with the opacity and just make sure that they're in roughly the right spot. This looks like it could actually move a little bit left, I'd say. But once you're lined up, just check it with the opacity, and if they're in roughly the right sort of spot, then you're looking good. And then you change the opacity so it stays to 100%, and you repeat this process for the following 2 frames. So I'm going to take this off, but I'm going to click on this frame here and enable it. And you'll see now that we're looking at another slightly offset view. So I will re-enable the transform tool. I'll take the opacity down again. And again, I'm just looking to line up this guy's nose. That looks about right there, I would say. That's looking good. So I'll raise that back up to 100% opacity. Go to the following frame, enable it, take the opacity down. And again, we'll just line up his noses about there, I would say. Looking good. Yeah, something like that. Raise the opacity to 100, and then I'll click done, and then I'm going to put this view back just to the standard fit view. Now, one of the things that you will see once you've edited these photos to all be on top of each other is particularly down the sort of right or left hand side of the frames, or at the top and bottom, you'll see that there's some overlap going on, and you're going to be losing some of the frame because you're going to have to crop into this to make it properly proportioned. What I tend to do is I actually crop it to be a 9:16 image, which is like an Instagram story size, a reel size, or TikTok size, but you can crop it however you like, to be square or to be anything you'd want it to be, but we'll do that in a minute. The first thing we've got to do is get all these frames in order to create the animation. So the way to do that is to basically re-drag all of the 3 frames that you dragged on top of the first one to the place they were before. So we'll drag frame 2 and put it here. We'll drag frame 3 and put it after it. And we'll drag frame 4 and put it after that. Now, to be able to create the animation, what you need to do is to create a sort of ping pong back and forth between the 1st and the 4th frames. And obviously to do that, we've got to fill the gap, because if we were just to copy and paste this, you'd have a really big jerk between the 4th and the 1st frames because there's nothing to fill it in the middle, if that makes any sense. So what I do is take the 3rd frame and literally just copy it and paste it after the 4th frame, like so. And I'll do the exact same thing with the 2nd frame, where I'll copy it and I'll paste it after the 3rd frame. So then in order on your timeline, you've got frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. So then when you copy and paste this back and forth, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, if that makes sense. So you're going back and forth between the first and the last frames and filling it in with those middle ones in between. So once you've got that in order, you'll be able to kind of check by just moving your mouse across to make sure it's looking good, which this is for sure. What I then do is I select all of these frames like so, and I'll right click on it and I'll create a new compound clip. And basically what this does is it just makes it one clip rather than being the 6 individual frames like it is now. So I press new compound clip. You can call this whatever you want to do. I'm just going to keep it as that Nimslo clip 69 TE and press OK. Now you've got this one animated clip like so, which is very slow. So if I was to play this back, it's obviously way too slow between the frames. As you can see, I mean, it's taking like, what, 10 seconds a frame. This might be slightly different on your Final Cut depending on what the default settings are, but obviously that is far too slow. So the next thing to do is to make this a lot faster, and you do that, there's a kind of little speed tool just here next to the crop tool and the transform tool and all that sort of stuff, and I click it and I will go to fast, and you want to speed it up by a fair old bit. This is up to you depending on how fast you really want the movement back and forth to be, but I start off at the fastest possible time, and then you'll see it starts to become a bit faster, but to me that's still too slow. So I'm going to zoom into the clip here and I'm going to drag this right hand side to increase how fast it is, and I might do it something more like 3,500%, something around there. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, so that's getting there. To me that's still too slow, so I'm going to drag it, make it faster. Let's go up to over 5,000%. That's getting there. Again, I think it's still a bit too slow, so I'm going to drag it even more. That's starting to look like it to me. So I think that's a good speed, I would say. And once you're happy with the speed, then all that's left to do is to grab this clip, copy it, and paste it as many times as you would like. I normally do it to make up to about sort of 5 seconds worth of footage. And this is a good time to then review it and see if you're happy with the speed. So if I press play, we'll see how this animation is looking now. Yeah, there you go. See, I think that's looking pretty darn cool. So that's great. So now once you're happy with that, you can make these into another compound clip. You highlight them all and the same thing, right click, press new compound clip, call it whatever you like. And then again, this is one long clip here. And this is where you can apply the crop settings that you'd like to. Because now that we're happy with the animation, how fast it is, everything's lined up and looking good, you can then crop it to the size that you'd like it to be. Now you can see in Final Cut here, I'm operating in a timeline that's got, by default, a 9:16 frame or 1080 by 1920. So it's a vertical frame. So for me, what I essentially want to do is just make this fill the frame. So I'm just going to go to Transform Tool and basically pinch it and zoom it in all the way until there are no black borders around it. See how that looks? If we play this back, so it's looking pretty cool. The only thing I'm noticing is, if you can see, every so often at the bottom, you've got this black line, which is again where we've lined the frames up. One of them's obviously had to be slightly higher than the others. So I might just try and bring this down slightly to cover that up. Hopefully that then won't make a black line at the top, which it kind of has. So in which case, I'm just going to zoom her in a tiny bit more like that. And that should be good. So to me, that's looking good. Now that you're happy with it, I'm just going to play it back one more time. I think that's looking really cool. Happy with the speed, happy with the crop, happy with how it's all lined up. So I will export this now. Command E is the export button on my setup here, and you can choose the settings. Again, these can kind of be what you want them to be. I kind of set these to this just because it makes it mostly compatible with everything. Name it whatever you'd like. I'm going to call this Nimslo test. You can press next, and then you can export this to wherever you like. Just for now, I'm going to put it in this movies section here and save it. And it shouldn't take too long because it's quite a small file. So we'll let Final Cut do its thing whilst it renders it and exports it. And then you should have yourself an animated Nimslo 3D photo. And there we go. There's the finished result. A Nimslo 3D photo animated. I hope this has been useful for you. Thank you so much for watching. And if you've got a Nimslo 3D camera, I'd love to see any results you've got. So do link me some stuff in the comments. If you have any questions as well, please let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. But until next time on the channel, thanks for watching, everybody. See ya.